All right, so what does this have in common with this, and this, and this, and this, and this? Well, that is why we're here today. Today, we are talking about fretting hand muting, or as I like to call it, selective mutism. Now, this is a technique that I find is one that a lot of newer players don't think about very much. And what it essentially comes down to is there are going to be times, in fact, a lot of times, where when you're playing, whether it be single notes or chords, you'll need to pick and choose which strings you play and when you play them. This could be something as simple as omitting the low E string when you play a C chord, or something like being able to play power chords and octaves without hearing a bunch of other strings ringing. So here are the three most common ways that we see fret hand muting utilized in our guitar playing. Number one is omitting specific strings from full chords. The first example that I showed of this was playing our typical open C chord. And normally when we learn it, we just say, oh, just don't play that low E string. However, there's something in there that we could do to help us so that we don't accidentally hit it anyway. And what that is letting the tip of our ring finger slightly touch that low E string so that even if we were to hit it, it's nice and choked. Now that's fairly nuanced, and we do it on a handful of other open chords, like when we play a G like this and we need to mute that fifth string right there. Right? We're letting the inside of our middle finger there touch that fifth string so that we're fretting the sixth string, choking the fifth string, and letting everything else ring out. But where we likely most commonly see fret hand muting come into play is when we're playing our classic power chords. You see, we have to be able to hit these strings that are fretted, but we don't want to hear these last three strings. And yet you see these punk guys or whoever, they're wailing on the strings and hitting all the strings. This is how. They are often utilizing the inside of your index finger here, or even the underside of your pinky there, to touch these three strings and mute them so that you can't hear them. And that's how you get this sound. If I were to play each string individually, it would sound like this. Now this is something that takes time to figure out where you need to be, right? You don't want to push the strings down too hard because then you'll actually fret them and then it sounds like this. And that's just a G minor chord, that's not your power chord. But you also don't want to be so relaxed and so loose that you let things ring out like this. Right? You hear the difference there. So you want to make sure that you understand that you've got your finger lightly touching the strings, not pressing them down or fretting them, but just lightly touching them so you get this dead sound. Then as you're practicing your power chords, you can figure out where on your hand you need to lightly touch. Some people it may be more of the inside, whereas mine is just slightly on the edge there. Or, you know, some people may use the underside of this pinky depending on how they hold their guitar. It's all a personal thing that you have to work through on your own. This is of course used in power chords and some open chords and even all the way down to jazz chords, where in jazz chords we frequently try to only really play no more than 4 strings. And so, for instance, like our A minor 7, we want to hear the 6th string, 4th string, 3rd string, and 2nd string. So what we'll do is we'll fret it like this with these 2 fingers and allow our 5th string to be muted and also to allow our 1st string to be muted. This is probably the most common first endeavor into fret hand muting. Now, as far as how commonly these next 2 techniques are used, that's kind of up in the air, so we're just going to jump over to octaves. Octaves is a technique that dates back to jazz guitar. If you've never heard of Wes Montgomery, go check him out. He is the master of playing octaves on the guitar. But we also use it very frequently in rock and especially in punk and pop punk and that alternative early 2000s era music. Now, the first step of this technique is how do we find the octaves? Well, for those of you who are not aware, If you're playing a note that is on the 6th string or the 5th string, you can find the octave by going 2 strings up, so from 6 to 4 or from 5 to 3, and 2 frets up as well. And so that looks like this. Or, but we want to be able to play these with a pick and be able to hear that really aggressive sound that sounds like this. This is that technique that we're talking about. So what we're doing here is we're playing our D and the octave to D as well, or in other words, our 5th fret on our 5th string and our 7th fret on our 3rd string. And what we want to do is we want to play that lower D, or that 5th fret 5th string, in such a way with our index finger that we're holding that down, but we're also muting as many of the other strings as we can. So you'll see that I have these muted, as well as I'm lightly touching that 6th string as well to mute it. Then we take our pinky and let that be reinforcement. So I'm now plucking the 7th fret 3rd string, but I'm also using my pinky to mute the 2nd string and the 1st string. And then for good measure, especially on that low E string, I let my middle finger lightly rest on that 6th string right there, so that we have everything completely muted to the best of my ability. Now when we try to find the octave up from a 4th string note or a 3rd string note, what we want to do is we want to do the same thing where we jump 2 strings up, so from 4 to 2 or from 3 to 1, but instead of going up 2 frets, we want to go up an extra fret. And so that looks like this. Like I said, you can see this technique in just about every single genre: funk, jazz, rock, punk, you name it, it's there. The last fret hand muting technique that we most commonly see is most typically called chucking. But what it essentially means is that while we're playing a chord of some sort, we are able to lift off and hit the string still with our pick and do some sort of kind of rhythmic additive to our playing. Something like this. I feel like it's most commonly identified as being used with funk, but it's also used very heavily across genres. You can see it in the main riff for Smells Like Teen Spirit and a lot of other things where you're playing a chord and then you are lightly touching the strings. You're not necessarily changing the chord shape, right? We just lift off enough so that we're able to scrape those strings. And we now have this rhythmic additive that we can throw in between our harmonic chords that we're playing. Always remember that honestly, guitar is primarily a rhythmic harmonic instrument. Even though we have cool guitar lines and guitar solos, when we think about what its role is in a band, it's mostly helping form the harmonic structure of the song and providing some sort of rhythmic element to keep the band locked in or to feed off of the drummer or something like that. If you'd like to know more about the various roles that a guitar plays, you can go ahead and click here on this video. But I digress. The other thing that's really interesting about this is that it shows us this rhythmic sound that we can get from our guitar. And then you realize why it's so important for us to learn to mute in the other regards. Because when we play a power chord and we're hitting all the strings but muting these 3, what we're doing is we now are adding a more aggressive element. If we just hear these top 3 strings, it's not the same as. There's this ever so slight edge to hitting all the strings because you're actually hearing this mixed in. And that may not sound like a lot to you, but when used in context, it adds this aggression and percussiveness to everything you do, and therein lies the reason why fret hand muting is so important. It's because it allows us to fulfill our harmonic and our rhythmic role as a guitarist. I feel like I can hear that concept most distinctly used in the opening lick for Can't Stop by the Red Hot Chili Peppers, which I played a little bit at the beginning. The reason why is because even though those notes are only, when we add that aggressive muting sound to it, all of a sudden it sounds really aggressive and funky and cool. Anywho, hope that helped you guys out. Let me know down in the comments what your favorite uses of fret hand muting are. Let me know if it's something you've even thought about before, or if it's a new concept entirely. I'd love to open a discussion on that. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. My name is Mac Wright. If you are new here, please like and subscribe. If you're returning, thanks for being a part of the channel. Please go make someone else's day better. We'll see you around.